believe it or not, this is going to hit a little close to home for me. Not because it's in Washington, but because a Washington school district in Thurston County, in an equity report, basically deemed that Asian people are no longer people of color. Which
You're Asian?
I know.
Wow.
Don't be too surprised by that. But
Breaking news.
I've actually, anyone in this office knows that for a while I've been banging this drum that it just feels like Asian people have had their person of color card revoked. And this equity report, to be fair, it was from 2019 and it was promptly removed after some outrage, understandable outrage.
Asians.
Yeah. But yeah, it was basically monitoring, things like opportunity, and it even kind of categorized students of poverty and non-poverty students. But this just kind of it brought to light the nature of identity politics that the left loves to dabble in. It is just this just shows it's arbitrary. It's nonsense.
So they were reclassified as white.
Yeah, they lumped together. So in the opportunity gap of this equity report, students, it separated white/Asian students and then students of color.
Wow.
So I guess my first question, just simply put, like, isn't this kind of racist? Like, this feels, not to play the race game here, but if the left's always going to accuse conservatives of being racist, this feels a little racist.
Well, I'll tell you, if I guess maybe it's a dangerous game today to play if I were a person of color, but if I were a person of color who was not Asian, I think I would be somewhat insulted at this, because then isn't the implication that Asians are too successful to be classified as people of color? So therefore, the people you classify as people of color are the unsuccessful people. Mm-hmm. And that does seem I'm not sure if it's racist so much as just backward and absurdist.
Right. I agree with Josh. I don't think it's racist. I think that it kind of shows the issue is that when you're obsessed with race, you're going to make stupid decisions like that, where you kind of become the arbiter of who's, these people are going to be students of color. We're going to show special treatment of students of color. I think that in Reason, they wrote a good story about this, and I think the point that they made is very good. It's that what the report reveals is that, and I'm quoting, the absurdities that result from over-reliance on semi-arbitrary race-based categories. So why are you dividing the stuff by race anyway? That's the first question.
Yeah.
Because then that just opens the door for your own stupid categories and whatnot. What's the point of this? Why? Why are you doing it?
Well, what's incredibly sad, too, is that it doesn't have to actually be like this when you're talking about these things in terms of achievement. Walter Williams, we ran an op-ed from Walter Williams yesterday, I think it came out yesterday, where he was talking about what happens in charter schools in New York, and what happens to different races when they show up in charter schools versus regular schools. And there are a couple really cool examples in New York because space is at a premium there, right? Sure. So there are a couple of public schools that also host charter schools in the same building. So these are clearly comparable cohorts, right? There are some kids who are in the charter school. There are some kids who are in the public school. And it is stunning the difference that it makes when the kids are in the charter schools, where they're allowed to boot students who don't behave well, where there's more accountability and those things. So it's not that... it's so depressing to think that, that you perform too well to be classified as a person of color. Mm-hmm. Well, there are black kids who perform incredibly well. They perform better than white kids. Mm-hmm. But they've got to be in an environment where there's accountability, and they also have to have parents who care enough to make sure they end up on the right path, which in some cases is the charter school. And so it's so fatalistic to me to say, Asians are just doing too well. We're not going to classify them as people of color because, people of color, they're going to underperform. Yeah. And that's what George W. Bush called, the subtle racism of low expectations.
Are you favorably citing George W. Bush?
Yeah, I'll favorably cite George W. Bush on plenty of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, it's just
not my favorite president, but I liked him.
Yeah. To me, it does sort of show this, what's the word I'm looking for here? I like the word that you use, fatalistic, almost like this, like you're trying to bake this victimhood into, just like, you know,
Oh, you
as
poor
weird
kid, you're
as
a
weird
student
as
of
this is
color.
for me to say, you know, mockingly, oh, you're not white or Asian,
Yeah.
you're screwed. Like,
Yeah,
like
it-
that's what these types of reports do.
Right, and it advances the narrative that is so important to the left because the left's whole thing is divisional politics. So it's building voting blocks, and so it used to be class based. Now it's race based, and to some extent gender identity based. But it's so perverse because it really there is so much fatalism in that where the little kid who grows up thinking this thinks, well, geez, I'm black, you know, I guess it's game over. And if you've got that kind of fatalism is in your heart, you know, it makes you do really, really stupid things too. People who are nihilistic go out and they make really bad decisions that hurt not only them but other people, and whether that's drugs or a sexually libertine lifestyle or crime or whatever, they make really bad decisions because they think there's no hope.
Yep,
It's
there's a hopelessness. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I because I just remember, you know, me personally growing up, it was never my my parents were never like, oh, like, you're not white, like, you know, who cares about that? It's bust your hump, like, do what you gotta do, bust your hump, and
you made it.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm on WJ
Here
Live.
he is, Brian Chai.
But yeah, it's just such a weird. Like, so I guess my follow-up question, it's a little broader. How concerned are you guys that this is not reversible? Because it feels like we're much closer to, like, you know, I don't know, the purple race also losing their person of color card versus us, you know, getting away from this line of thinking. You know, it feels like we're headed towards something much worse, and I have no idea what it is, which makes it even scarier. How worried are you guys that this is sort of almost just the beginning of this, because this type of fatalistic thinking?
That we're divided and can never come back together?
Yeah.
You have any thoughts?
I mean, I think I think that political correctness and sort of this sense of identity politics, and I think intersectionalism, where it's your different kind of sections of victimhood, whether you're black or Asian or a woman, or whether you're gay or whether you're trans. I do think that has so... I don't think most people like it. I mean, you look at California, right? And they had a proposition that went on the ballot recently to basically say, yeah, you can discriminate against people if they're... I don't quite remember the specifics, but they said, yeah, you can discriminate
based on these circumstances.
White people, basically, or whatever. And most people said, no, this is a terrible idea, and they voted it down. So I think the public has common sense. I think the public is on the side of common sense. I think the issue is that leftists are so ingrained into the education system, into the government, into, you know, colleges especially, where they are the ones who are making, you know, these rules, and it makes these institutions kind of meaningless.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I agree. And one of the things the left has going for it, and will always have going for it, that conservatives don't, is for the left, the work of government and the work of improving humanity and those things, those can become super core to their identity. For a lot of people who are conservatives, the cores to their identity are hard work or their family or their relationship with God. And so those things kind of fill them up on the inside. And so they don't feel compelled to go out and find problems. And they don't feel compelled to define themselves by, oh, I've made this difference in this disenfranchised person's life. Whereas if you're on the left, I bring up nihilism again. You know, there's an emptiness that goes with godlessness. There's an emptiness that goes without having a family. And so you try to fill it with something, and you want your life to be worth something. So you become an activist. You begin acting on behalf of the planet, or you begin acting on behalf of people of color or whatever. And at that point, it's in your interest to promote those divisions, because as long as the divisions exist, then you have a purpose for being.
And I think a lot of them are good. You know, they have the right intentions, right? They want, you know, from a general
they want to do something good. There are a whole lot of useful idiots.
Sure.
And not to be too hard on them, but that's basically what they are, because, you know, Marx, Lenin, they realized you can use these people to advance your ideology because they don't necessarily have a moral core that other people do, or a core identity that other people do.